All right, good evening. It is 6:04. This is the August 1st meeting of the Somerville Planning Board. Tonight with me are Debbie Howard Easton, Luke Schuster, Michael McNeely, and Jahan Habib. I'm Amelia Aboff. I'm chairing tonight's meeting. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting of the Somerville Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation. A video recording of these proceedings will be available on the city website or by emailing planning@somervillema.gov. We have a number of items up tonight, including minutes, a few cases that have been opened already, and new items as well as the Brook Bottom Neighborhood Plan. We will start first with the approval of minutes, starting with the minutes from the meeting on June 20th, 2024. Does anyone have any comments or corrections to the June 20th meeting minutes? Okay. I actually do have one edit to those minutes, if I can make this request to staff. In the item on '45 Mystic, if I can ask at the end of that we reflect questions being raised about the hardship variance rather than any statements. I think that was more of an inquiry rather than a claim, so I'd appreciate that being revised. If there are no other modifications.
I was going to say Steve Carey in the planning division. Happy to make that edit.
Thank you so much. So with that change, I will move to adopt the June 20th, 2024 meeting minutes, seconded by Jahan. Steve, could you please call the roll?
This is Steve Carey in the planning division. Debbie Howard Easton.
Aye.
Jahan Habib.
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
And Amelia Aboff.
Aye. Thank you. And for the July 9th meeting, July 9th, 2024, does anyone have any comments or corrections to that set of meeting minutes? Seeing none, I will move to adopt the July 9th meeting minutes, seconded by Jahan. Roll call, please.
This is Steve Carey in the planning division. Debbie Howard Easton.
Aye.
Jahan Habib.
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
And Amelia Aboff.
Aye. Thank you. All right, our next item is a requested continuance for the property at 290 Revolution Drive. I believe this was opened at a meeting several weeks ago and has requested a few continuances. They've requested an additional continuance to the August 15th meeting. Unless anyone has any objections to that, I will move that we accept that request to continue the case to August 15th. Seconded by Jahan. Steve, will you please call the roll?
This is Steve Carey in the planning division. Debbie Howard Easton.
Aye.
Jahan Habib.
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
And Amelia Aboff.
Aye. All right, thank you. That will be continued. The next item we have this evening is 7172 Union Square, which has previously been opened and read into the record, but I know that it was read into the record at a meeting where we had some public access issues. To staff, would you prefer that we read that into the record again, or is that effectively open?
This is Steve Carey in the planning division. I think just for the sake of dotting our I's and crossing our T's, it should be read into the record again.
John, would you mind?
Sure, Madam Chair. 71-72 Union Square, ZP 24-000059. Continued from the July 18th, 2024 meeting. Walter Sullivan seeks a major amendment to a previously issued special permit for cannabis retail CZC 2020-00039 for in the commercial core 4 CC4 zoning district.
Thank you so much. And I will note that both Debbie and myself were absent from that last meeting, but we have reviewed the recording such as it is and submitted the accompanying affidavits. Yes, Michael.
I was just going to say, while we're at the point of making declarations about previous meetings and affidavits, I was absent from the July 9th meeting, but I also did watch that and submit the appropriate affidavits.
Thank you very much. All right, so I think that it would be appropriate, given the technical difficulty at the last meeting, to ask the applicant to refresh us on their short presentation from the last meeting. If we could please ask you to do that, Walter, I see that you are with us on video. Thank you so much.
Yes, Madam Chair, since I've already spoke last time, I'll try to be very brief. In 2021, when we were granted a special permit, there were only 100 cannabis stores open in Massachusetts, none in Somerville. There are over 500 stores open today and 6 in Somerville. I really don't need you to think you need appointment only. We're requesting 2 things here. One, a waiver of the transportation impact and access study, that's required as a condition of the special permit in order to get the walk-in waived. I believe that you all can take judicial notice, for lack of a better word of putting it, in your everyday life, seeing how these stores are operating in Somerville and throughout the state, knowing that there has not been any crowds at these locations. The second is the removal of the condition that walk-ins are prohibited, and that all appointments must be by appointment only. You may or may not know this, but in Somerville, the 6 stores now that are operating, they all technically require appointment only, but reality is people are walking in and making the appointments when they come into the store. And this has been allowed, I don't know, by the building commissioner, planning staff, or whatever, but basically they're allowing walk-ins to occur today. I don't agree with the staff that, given that the other stores are operating on appointment only, that we should still be required to do that. Someone has to be first. We are the first ones to file a request to remove the requirement. I think it's the appropriate thing to do. I think to keep it going would impact other businesses in Union Square. By allowing us to have walk-ins, it brings more people to the square. It is not detrimental to the businesses or the residents. And I believe the correct thing to do is to remove the prohibition of walk-ins and requiring appointment only. Sorry, that wasn't brief enough. I'm sorry.
No, thank you for refreshing us on that. And can you remind me, is the retailer currently operating, or for how long have they been operating?
Yes. Oh, thank you for bringing that up. I want to note here that we began operating, I think, in June. Prior to operation, there's a requirement from the Somerville Licensing Commission that there be appointment only for 6 months. We went to the Somerville Licensing Commission and asked that that condition be removed prior to opening. And I believe, based on what the commission saw how these stores were operating, they granted the removal of the condition. I think this board should do the same.
Thank you very much for your presentation. This is a public hearing tonight, so we will move to see if there's anyone with us this evening who wishes to give testimony on this topic. Yes, Michael.
Can I just ask one quick clarifying question first?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. Sullivan, at the last discussion, you made a comment about this not just being for your applicant, but that you'd like to remove the appointment requirement for everyone, just for kind of like making sure we're crystal clear on this. The application is just for your. Okay.
Right. I think that you as a board have the authority, after posting for public hearing, the ability to bring them all forward and remove the condition. And I think that's what the board should be doing. I was hoping that the board would take that action before this meeting tonight, but that did not occur. And maybe you just didn't have enough time, but I think that would be the correct action for the board to take. Not wait for the applicants to come forward, but the board take action on their own, and they have that authority.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Are there any other questions for the applicant before we open it up to public testimony? Okay. Seeing none, we will open the hearing to the public. If we can ask anyone to please raise their hand, anyone wishing to speak in favor of this application. Steve, I'm not seeing any hands. Are you?
Steve Carey in the planning division, not seeing anyone. Nope.
Okay. All right, we will close that and ask for hands from anyone who wishes to speak in opposition or express concern about this application.
Steve Carey in the planning division, also not seeing any hand raised.
With that we will close the public hearing portion and deliberate among the board.
I'm sorry, Chair,
Yes.
Chair Boff, I'm sorry to interrupt. I did see, just before you closed it, I did see a hand go up. That may be permitted for that person to comment?
Yes, please, thank you.
Sure. I'm Joe Lynch. I am unmuting you on our end. You'll have to unmute yourself on your end.
Thank you very much, Steve. To the chair and the members, Joe Lynch, Chair of the Somerville Licensing Commission. I'm not here to speak pro or con on the applicant, but to give you any factual data you may need to make your decision regarding how the Somerville Licensing Commission comes to their conclusion about appointment-only status. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lynch. I have some thoughts and questions of my own, and we'll likely have some questions for staff and for Mr. Lynch. But before I jump in, I'd love to hear the thoughts of my colleagues on this item. Yes, Luke.
Thanks. I'll just start by saying, you know, anecdotally, I have heard the same thing that Mr. Sullivan says, that the by appointment only, there's many workarounds that are happening in practice, and seems to me, unless there's a strong reason to actually demand that the appointments really happen, it would be better for the city to just not pretend that they're appointment only and remove that condition. So there may be some important details around how to do it, and if we should do that for one shop before all the others, or if, like Mr. Sullivan suggested, maybe we actually could somehow in short order set in motion a process to remove that condition for everyone. I'll just say at the beginning of this conversation, I'm certainly open to that idea. Seems like a reasonable thing given that we're, I don't know what it is, a few years into these shops operating and there being no issue with long lines. So I'm all for, you know, making it easier for small businesses to thrive in the city. But I'll leave it at that for the moment.
Thank you. Yes, Debbie.
Thank you. I actually had a question for staff, because the staff memo includes, I think it's a note from Mobility, indicating that they're working closely with the planning, preservation, and zoning to determine if this requirement, which I know has been a universal one, is still appropriate, given, you know, as Luke mentioned, kind of the reality of how these are operating. And I was curious, you know, where in the process that is.
This is Steve Carey in the planning division. I don't really have an update at this point, other than it's something we'd want to just be thoughtful about and consider all of the operating you know, cannabis dispensaries we have in the city at this point, and try to understand if there is any in particular that you know, would cause a negative detrimental impact by removing that requirement.
Thank you. And maybe just a follow-up question. This might be for Mr. Lynch in terms of process. If that change were to happen universally across all the licensed facilities, is that something that has to go through the licensing commission as well?
Through the chair to the member, if I understand the question, when an applicant makes their application to the different boards and different commissions across the city or the state, the first stop would have to be the licensing commission in order to allow that to go on to planning or ZBA. We file on behalf of the applicants to the state, to the Cannabis Control Commission. Within those rules and regulations, the licensing commission has wide discretion over the time, manner, and place of these shops. In the beginning, to the member, brief history says when these applications started to come in 2017, 2018, 2019, we did not have a crystal ball to predict the success or failure of these. So it was the licensing commission who worked with the planning staff at the time and with the administration at the time to put 6-month by appointment only condition on each of these shops. We would reevaluate that based on need, and that is how the licensing commission grants or denies or conditions licenses. What is the need? We couldn't tell what the need was going to be in Somerville. We knew that 73% of the residents voted for it. Pandemic interrupted a lot of the applications, such as what Councilor Sullivan is representing tonight for Union Leaf. That's why they kind of got a late start. Last year, the Somerville Licensing Commission was approached by at least 3 of the cannabis shops that now are fully operational in the city to get rid of that 6-month by appointment only. The Licensing Commission had a public hearing, no objection. The Licensing Commission granted all 3 of those. So it was a surprise to me when I found out that the planning board at the time had put a almost in perpetuity kind of condition on these shops to say you had to operate by appointment only. It is within the realm of the Licensing Commission to govern the time, the manner, and the place. That by appointment only was done by the Licensing Commission. We have received 0 complaints from any of the cannabis shops that have been operating in the city. No customer complaints through 311, no calls to SPD, no concerns from economic development, planning staff, zoning, nothing. So it was our intent to take these application by application. And Councilor Sullivan is correct. When he appeared on behalf of the applicant last month or 2 months ago, we granted to them get rid of the appointment only. So I can't go beyond the facts that we have. But I think as Luke was stating, these shops are here to stay. Some will succeed, some will not. And the Licensing Commission can take each of these cases one by one. If we feel as though there is a need to reduce hours or put another condition on those licenses, such as by appointment only because of public safety, public health, complaints from neighbors, we can do that. So I hope that answers your question, Deb.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll just, sorry, Debbie, did you have anything else on that for the moment?
No, I'm good, thank you.
I'll just say for my part, I'm not prepared to I completely accept the reality that this is a condition that is not currently being enforced in a lot of the properties that it is currently subject to, but I would not take ISD's failure of their enforcement responsibility as a reason for the board to give up on a condition that we had applied to a number of businesses with good reason and with sort of a basis in reality and staff recommendation. So respectfully, I disagree that at this time it is appropriate to completely, abolish that condition. I do think there is a good case to be made for revisiting those on a case-by-case basis, as the Licensing Commission has been doing. But I think that there are a lot of factors that differ between these establishments in terms of volume, in terms of location, in terms of things like transportation access, and sort of how people are getting to and from these sites. Over the course of hearing many applications for the city's dispensaries, we've heard a lot of feedback from neighbors and from local sort of neighboring businesses who have voiced concerns about the impacts of these establishments on or near their property. And while I don't think that I'm glad to hear that the Licensing Commission and 309 haven't received any complaints from the businesses that have had this condition removed, I wouldn't want to extrapolate that to assume that it's universal, understanding the very varying neighborhood conditions in which these are located. And I think the planning board serves a useful function as a forum for neighbors to express any concerns or questions they may have. So my personal stance would be in favor of revisiting this on a case-by-case basis, but in giving the public a chance to opine and giving the board a chance to assess on a case-by-case basis the appropriateness of that change. And in my mind, one of the most important factors for that would be a transportation study. So I'm open to the idea that we remove this condition, but the ask that we remove it without the benefit of a transportation study that shows sort of what the current scenario is and what the future scenario is likely to be in an unrestricted mode of sales. I find that to be, I would find that to be a problematic precedent to set, I guess. As you point out, Mr. Sullivan, you are the first person to come to us with this request. And I think that the ask to waive the transportation study is, to me, a more challenging one than the ask to have the condition potentially removed after review of such traffic study. I'm curious how my fellow board members feel about that sort of aspect of this application. Luke.
I have a few other thoughts, but just for the moment on the last part, on the transportation access study, I just, we heard this was in Davis Square, not Union, but we heard a similar case recently, and the concern many of us had there was about the oversaturation of cannabis shops and there not being enough demand to support them if all 15 are going to open in some time. And I find it unlikely that the traffic volume from the changing from appointment only to non-appointment would make a big difference, especially in a place like Union Square. I mean, it just feels like more vibrancy there was just all for the better. So I just don't quite see how much that could shape my thinking on this. But that's my thought.
Mr. Sullivan?
Madam Chair, I do agree with you, take a case-by-case basis, your approach. I think given what these businesses represent and who would be impacted, the cost of doing a transportation study. A number of these businesses are minority owned, disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. And to add another cost on them is burdensome, especially given that using your own thoughts of what you see going on in the city is just as good as a traffic study. If given the way they are working today. I'm not saying the traffic study isn't important, but I think this isn't a close call between is it impacting the community or not. It's clear just from walking around in statewide, these stores are not full. There aren't people waiting to get in. In fact, business is very slow for this industry. Some of them, especially in Davis Square, is overcrowded with cannabis retail stores. And I don't know how they're all going to survive. You find the same thing in Central Square in Cambridge. None of these stores are busy at all. And I think you can use your own, what you see in your own life experience to make that determination. If you're not able to make that determination in your own life experience, then I believe a traffic study would be appropriate. But that's for the board to decide whether they would waive that requirement or not. And that's within your prerogative to do as a board.
I think watchers of this board will know that we are not usually inclined to waive traffic studies where we think there is useful information to be gained from them. And as one board member, it would be my opinion that waiving the traffic study here would be inappropriate, given the relatively short time that the business has been operating and sort of the unknown volumes and the concentration of development around Union Square and the shortcomings of the Green Line, which, while certainly not the fault of the applicant, are impacting the functional use of public transit to reach certain establishments. And moreover, I would not want to set the precedent of waiving a traffic study for this applicant when we have established, I think, consensus that we are likely to approach this on a case-by-case basis moving forward, and we may well want traffic studies from other applicants. So that's just one member's opinion. I welcome the thoughts of my colleagues on sort of both parts of this question that's before us. Michael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to go back to an even earlier point that went back and forth around lack of enforcement, implying reason to remove a certain restriction. And I think I also would be concerned to remove a requirement just based on lack of previous enforcement. So for what it's worth, philosophically, not just on this topic, but kind of any topic that may come before us, just because something's not being implemented doesn't convince me that it shouldn't be. So just wanted to kind of put my position there on that. In terms of kind of waiving the traffic study specifically, I think I also am concerned about precedent setting here. I do agree that I think this should be thought about on a case-by-case basis, just like I do believe that the appointment only requirement should be considered on a case-by-case basis, and I would seriously consider removing that on this particular establishment. I am a little bit concerned about removing the traffic study requirement here, just because it is an area that's very much in flux, and it is an area with a lot of traffic already. And to the chair's point, I do think that there has been unexpected pressure on foot traffic there and bikes because of some of the scheduling issues with the Green Line. So just a couple of thoughts that were bouncing around as I heard the debate go back and forth from my perspective.
Jahan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In broad terms, I'm also in agreement on with respect to looking at these cannabis establishments on a case-by-case basis with respect to the appointment consideration. And when it comes to the traffic study, I also would feel much more comfortable having a study done rather than just relying on anecdotal, while maybe accurate at certain times, still, in my opinion, would be considered anecdotal evidence of foot traffic and other considerations. So I'm in support of what you mentioned, Madam Chair, and also Member McNeely has also stated as well.
Thank you. Yes, Luke.
I'm finding myself in the minority on many of these things. One other thing I wanted to chime in on, just on the thread about if something's not being enforced, is that a good reason to eliminate the requirement? To clarify, it seems to me like there may be two types of scenarios where something's not being enforced. One, where people are flouting an important regulation that ought to remain in place. And I think in that scenario, the right solution is enforcement rather than repeal. I don't think that's the scenario here. The other scenario is having a regulation in place that's years out of date, that most of us with our plain eyes can see is just not useful in practice, as far as I can tell, at least. And there, my sense is people aren't flouting it to be maximally disrespectful of the city's authority or anything like that. It's just most reasonable people realize anywhere else in most other places in the region, you don't need an appointment. These bins that there aren't lines around the corner, it's just not a big deal. And that's my sense, that's what's happening. And so under that scenario, I like the spirit of us being a municipality that reacts quickly to changing conditions on the ground and doesn't unreasonably keep regulations in place longer than their useful life has been in place. So that's my response to that concern.
Thank you. And Luke, I don't mean to downplay your concerns here. I think that your tendency to sort of represent the small business community in these conversations is very, very useful and very valid. So I apologize for being a little bit more of a stickler on some of the paperwork components of this.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Sullivan.
if I may, I don't know how this occurred, but I don't necessarily like to use the word these businesses intentionally not obeying the condition. Somehow this was worked out with the city to allow this. So these businesses aren't doing something intentionally to violate the conditions of the planning board's decisions. And I don't know if planning staff knows how this all occurred. But I think it was something that was worked out with the city in order to meet the requirement of the conditions put on the special permit. And I think that's how it occurred. It wasn't anyone flouting the law or so forth.
Mr. Sullivan, I don't mean to suggest anyone is flouting the law, but recreational cannabis businesses are subject to multiple levels of regulation in the city of Somerville, including their licensing by the Licensing Commission and those authorities, and their zoning enforcement, which is the purview of this board. So the fact that you had a waiver, that many of these applications may have a waiver from one entity, does not absolve them from that condition with the other entity that has enforced a similar condition on them. If I'm wrong on that, please, Mr. Lynch or staff correct me, but I believe the fact that you had two separate conditions and one of them has been waived, those are just independent facts at this moment in time.
I don't mean to, the licensing commission, I believe a number of the stores went to 6 months. So automatically it went away after the stores being in operation for 6 months. I think the chair said that, you know, he did have a few stores last year come and ask to have it removed. I'm specifically looking at the planning board's decision here and how the city looked at that and how to help these businesses be able to survive even with those conditions in place. And they came up with an idea. Walk into the business, make your appointment. And I mean, I don't think the city did it willy-nilly. I think they did it because they, you know, saw, hey, look, if this isn't as big of a issue, the businesses need to survive. We need to get them to be able to be operational, but we don't necessarily want the condition to be removed, but we want them to be able to be operational. I think someone has to come forward and ask that it be removed. I'm just happen to be the applicant that is doing that.
I understand. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Lynch.
Thank you to the chair. I cannot address the issue of traffic studies that are tied to the license, tied to the applicants. That is in the purview of planning, zoning, or mobility folks. The only thing that the licensing commission can do is place conditions on the time, the manner, and the place. And I think what we did on the licensing commission, it was the manner of the by appointment only, that we were trying to address concerns from the community, that there would be lines outside of the store, that there would be an enormous amount of traffic pressures on the other smaller businesses that surrounded these. So I'm not quite sure, and I'm not going to overstep my bounds here. I'm not sure that there are, I'm not sure how the by appointment only got tied to the need for a traffic study. I'm not positive how that was done. I don't purport to know which planners came in front of you and your body. What I will say is that we place those conditions for a certain period of time. So I'm not going to make any comments about the need for traffic studies in certain neighborhoods in this city. That is your purview. The time, the manner, and the place is what we control along with the CCC. I will tell you, the Cannabis Control Commission does have our conditions as part of their file. So when their inspectors go in, what they're looking for, and this is no dispersion against our friends at ISD, what they're looking for is, are you complying by the conditions of the City of Somerville license, as well as the Cannabis Control Commission rules and regulations? So they will ask for the audit of those by appointments. Is there a workaround? I've seen it, Chair. I've seen the workaround where people walk into the vestibule, they register for the appointment. If the internal retail is empty, they take the appointment right away. So is it a workaround? I'm not sure it is. I think it was intentionally left that way by the Cannabis Control Commission, that if a place is not busy, let the retailer make the decision on whether or not they can accommodate the people in the lobby. So that's all I wanted to say about by appointment only. I have no other comment about the required traffic study.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lynch. I think that this is an issue that's a little bit muddy because of the overlap in the similar condition that was imposed by these two independent entities that have separate paths for enforcement. So my understanding, and please anyone jump in if you understand differently, is that the licensing commission has waived the appointment requirement for some number of adult use cannabis retailers in the city. And that is independent of the planning board's decision on whether to waive the similar condition that the planning board had put in place for these businesses, which is written to be in perpetuity or until the applicant comes to us with a transportation study that allows us to confirm that that condition is no longer necessary and that a change to the means of sale will not be an issue from a land use perspective. So I believe that's where we are. I'm having a hard time reading sort of where the cards will fall with the full board here if we were to take a vote on this application this evening. So I will gently remind or ask you, Mr. Sullivan, that I believe that when a case comes before the planning board and is denied, there is then some additional layers of regulation on when it can come back to the board to be looked at again. So if you wanted to proceed differently than continuing this case this evening, please let us know. Otherwise, the board will discuss whether we're ready to vote tonight or want to continue this to our next meeting.
It's hard to, I think the question comes up to be, one, if you're not waiving the traffic study, which I think you would have to in order then to consider whether to remove appointment only. I believe that's what you have to do. Maybe you can just remove appointment only without waiving the traffic study. I don't think so, but I think if you don't waive the traffic study, the question comes up to be, can we come back to you with the traffic study at some point in the future? Is this similar to when a special permit is denied and you have so much time you can't come back? I don't think so, because it's a condition versus the permit itself. I'm struggling with the fact, I'm not sure, if you vote it down, what does it really do to us? It doesn't really change the way we can operate the way the other stores are operating. I don't think that's an appropriate way for the board to keep moving forward. I understand every concern you make about the traffic study, but as everyone, I believe every board member says, you take each case on a case-by-case basis. And I believe we made a good case as to why both should occur. And in this industry, I'm not talking about other types of industry, but in this industry operating in the city of Somerville, I don't think anyone on this board can say that they've saw problems that would clearly require a traffic study to be done. I think they all could make a decision in this particular instance that a traffic study would not need to be done in order for them to reach a conclusion as to whether appointment only should go away. That's just my take.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Respectfully, between the staff recommending denial and my prerogative as chair for this evening, I'm not prepared to recommend waiving the traffic study in order to move forward with this application. So nor am I certain what will happen and what the process is if we proceed and it is denied, and what the statutory requirement will then be for the time frame for you to come back. As one member, I would welcome a revised version of this application with it accompanied by a traffic study in the next few meetings with a request for the condition to be waived. I would feel very open to that, assuming there was nothing problematic in the traffic study. I think at this time it's probably appropriate to see where my fellow board members stand, and we'll determine how to proceed. Yes, Luke.
A couple quick thoughts on the traffic study piece of this, and then a question about options for us. On the traffic study piece, I'm a little worried about the idea I want to be sensitive to the importance of us as a board treating similar applicants in a uniform way. I think there is real value to that. I'm trying to restate what I heard from you, Amelia, as our practice to date on requiring traffic studies. And actually, maybe that's a helpful question back to you if you could state it again. And then, because what's on my mind is I might be a member that actually doesn't agree with that standard. And at a minimum, if I hear the standard clearly and realize I don't think that's the right approach, I'd like to state that for the record.
I think we've had a number of instances where applicants have asked us for waivers of traffic studies or asked for the freedom to present traffic studies after permits been granted and coordinate with staff on them. And I think due to this board's sensitivity to traffic, to bike parking being provided, to bike lanes and sort of the safety around them and the way they interact with other pieces of infrastructure, to loading, and loading is specifically a concern as it relates to security in these types of businesses. I think we have, and I'm just going off of my own memory here, so I welcome any further comments from other board members or from staff, but I think we have not often waived traffic studies when they have been requested or recommended by mobility. So in this case with mobility, with staff's overall recommendation being a denial of this in the absence of a traffic study, I would not be inclined to veer away from that recommendation. Sorry, that was not that clear. Michael?
I would just say, I think I agree and have a similar opinion from this is somewhat formed by mobility's recommendation to require this study. So, you know, when you're asking kind of where everyone's starting to feel, I think a lot of my thoughts echo yours, that I'm very open to waiving the appointment requirement, given there's no red flags from the traffic study. But I do think based on mobility's recommendation, I kind of push a little bit for that.
Don?
Madam Chair,
I'd like to hear the opinions of my colleagues first, if you don't mind. Thank you.
oh, I'm
Mr.
sorry. Please forgive me.
Don?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I am continuing to be in agreement with both you and Member McNeely with respect to the traffic study. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Debbie, you've been quiet. Anything you want to add?
I'm a little bit torn. I'm a bit convinced a little bit of Luke's concern on the small business side and the expense of a traffic study. And also, you know, in reading the staff memo and mobility's comments, I mean, in part, that's one of the reasons why I asked my question first, kind of where is that process going in terms of looking at it on a global point? Is that something that's going to take 3 years, you know, for mobility and, you know, planning, preservation and zoning to take a look at to, you know, sort of make a across the board decision? But then, you know, I'm also a little torn because sort of our condition of removal was based on having a traffic study to be able to assess what we all think is the reality, which is that it's likely not going to be any issues or implications if we remove appointment only. So apologies, because that doesn't, I know that doesn't move us along further, but I'm a little bit conflicted on, you know, which way I would vote, frankly, on this.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I mean, I would be, it'd be helpful if I could know how quickly sort of a global process could happen to look at these sort of universally to see if there's really a need to do traffic studies to, you know, waive the appointment only, you know, if sort of that's happening at a different level within the city. But again, I appreciate that doesn't move us forward, but I am a little bit back and forth on this, to be honest.
May I suggest to my colleagues that perhaps we continue this for the evening? We've taken most of an hour on this. We have a number of other items for this evening. And that gives everyone time to think about it, gives the applicant time to consider how they'd like to move forward. I think that might be the best course of action for the time being. I see a little bit of nodding. So I will make the motion. Yep, sorry, Luke.
Before we break on this, one lingering thing on my mind is there's a question of us about this applicant, but Mr. Sullivan in his opening comments raised the idea that perhaps this body, and now I'm speaking just about the appointment only piece of this, not the traffic study, but that maybe it was actually within our purview. I don't know if literally tonight, I think I can see which way the wind's going, and that's not going to happen tonight, even if I wanted it to, but that's sometime soon. We could actually just waive this requirement for all across the board if our concern is about doing it uniformly. So I just would be interested in more detail, perhaps from planning staff, on how the planning board could do that if we were so interested, going beyond this one applicant.
This is Steve Carey in the planning division. I'm afraid I don't have a clear answer for you at this point. I believe it is an action the board to take, given these are conditions that the board themselves imposed. I think it would require some sort of application from those special permit holders requesting the removal. So to be honest, I can't give a clear picture on what that process looks like. I would be happy to be able to provide that update at the next board meeting.
Yeah, I'd be curious about that. And I'm a member that would be open to that idea.
I'm going to move that we continue this item to our next meeting, which is Thursday, August 15th, I believe. And because we are continuing it, I will leave the written comment open if anyone wishes to provide written testimony on this until noon on Friday, August 9th. So move to continue this item to August 15th, seconded by Jahan. Steve, could you please call the roll?
Sure, this is Steve Carey in the planning division. Debbie Howard Easton,
Aye.
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Luke Schuster,
Hi.
and Amelia Aba.
Aye. Thank you very much for your time. We'll see you in a few
Thank you for your time. You guys have a great night.
All right, our next item is 500 Medford Street, which has not yet been opened. So, Mr. Clerk, if I can ask you to please read that into the record for us.
Yes, absolutely, Madam Chair. 500 Medford Street, ZP 24-000042. Core Empowerment LLC proposes to establish a cannabis retail sales use in the mid-rise MR4 zoning district, which requires a special permit.
Thank you. And just as some context, I will offer, I know that at a previous meeting, we discussed the moratorium on new cannabis uses being approved. I believe this was the last one in the queue before that moratorium went into effect in terms of cases that will be coming before us of this type. Do we have an applicant who wishes to present?
This is Steve Carey in the planning division. I do see a Mike Ross with his hand raised. Mr. Ross, I'm going to promote you to panelist. I also see April Arasate. April, I'm going to promote you to panelist as well.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Mike Ross. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Prince Lobel. I'm here with my associate attorney, Maggie Roberts, who's off screen, and our client principal for CORE, April Arasate. We also have other members of our team participating in the discussion, and I believe we might have one of our traffic engineers as well from Fuss O'Neill. Her name is Catherine O'Shea. Steve, if you see her, feel free to promote her if you could. I have a presentation, Madam Chair, that I'd be happy to share if I'd be allowed to do so. I
That would be
shall.
great. Thank you.
Okay, great. And Steve, I'm going to ask you once more if you could just let me share the screen there.
Sure, I've just promoted you. You should now have ability to share screen. Great.
Yeah.
And I'm not seeing Catherine O'Shea in the audience,
Okay.
but glad to promote her if she pops on.
Okay, thanks for letting us know. We'll let her know that we're on. So thank you for seeing us. I wanted to just introduce April and have her briefly talk about the company so that, and then I'm going to present after her. So turn it to you, April.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you all for having us here today. We are excited to tell you who we are. We've been in this process for a while and been in business for a while. So happy to share a little bit about the company. We are a women-owned business enterprise, 100% women-led management team. 89% of our company is owned by women and people of color. 74% of our investors are local to the Boston and metro area. And 82% of our investor dollars are from individuals who are of Black, African American, Hispanic, or Latino descent. Additionally, investors have collectively spent over 10 years incarcerated by the war on drugs. And I share these things just to let you know how intentional this business has been for us and how deliberate we were about how we launched this business and how we manage it. We are currently operating in Boston, in Jamaica Plain. We've been open over 3 years at Seed in Jamaica Plain. And we also house a nonprofit there, the Core Empowerment, the Core Social Justice Cannabis Museum, which really focuses on these impacts that the war on drugs has had on these particular communities. And we are very, proud of what we've done in this place and really excited about joining the Somerville community with a lot of these same values. Additionally, to this, we have a lot of experience in the cannabis space. You will see, this is my staff, or this is our team here. 3 of us are actually on this call. So I'm April Arasati. We have Kristen Picard, Chief Operating Officer, Sarah LeBlanche, Chief Financial Officer, and Lijuan Toma, who is a Director of Operations and Licensing. These collectively, the 4 of us have over 30 years of experience in the cannabis industry, with half of those being in Massachusetts. All of these people also work and have been part from almost the beginning of the operation there in Boston. So we just have a lot of experience in this space. And as I said, look forward to bringing that to the Somerville area and to our neighborhood.
Thanks, April.
Thanks, Mike.
So we've been at this for a bit. I show you this timeline just to kind of give you a sense that April's been trying to find a site in Somerville since 2019, so 5 years. And the initial sites didn't work out. It really takes everything lining up to get a site that works. There are 1,000 reasons why it won't, but in this case, it took us a couple of tries, but finally 500 Mitford was that site. And for the last, 3/4 of a year, we've been working, probably longer, working through that process to try to be ready to get approved. And here we are today at the planning board. We still have the steps ahead of this if we would be successful, going to the licensing board, going through the CCC and those processes as well. As you know, we're in an MR4 district where cannabis is allowed by a special permit. This is the site. This is the site when it was previously operating. The lower right shows that the site has since been closed. And it was a former liquor store, 3,000 square feet. I wanted to give you a sense of what's going on in Magoon Square and in the area. There are a number, I don't show this to you to be unfair or unkind. I just want to point out that there are a number of stores that are not operating right now. And look, cannabis might not be everyone's first choice for what they want in their neighborhood, but it's undeniable that when a cannabis store is open, it does create other opportunities for nearby businesses. And we feel very strongly that by being a part of the Magoon Square business community, we will be able to contribute and support what's happening there and try to strengthen the other businesses that are looking to open in this space and to thrive in this space. I also want to just point out about kind of where Somerville is with dispensaries. This site would be half a mile around from the nearest dispensary in Ball Square. And then there are some other sites where they're clustered, particularly around Davis Square and in the Bow Market area. But there's nothing presently within a half mile and further, depending which direction you're going in, from where we would be proposing the site at 500 Medford Street. We are also compliant with the 300 feet buffer zone from a school. This is what the floor plan would look like at the site. It's nice because we have that long span on Medford where there's two separate doors. One door for customers entering and exiting, the other door for deliveries. Back of house is pure back of house. Public area is pure public area. The site itself would be outfitted for 4 to 6 point of sale systems. There would be the opportunity to queue people internal to the site, so they wouldn't be hanging out on the streets. We also don't anticipate that level of business. And we know this by looking at other businesses in the immediate area and from operating our own businesses nearby, at least in Boston. The number of employees per shift would be somewhere around 6 to 8 per shift. And our proposal would be open Monday through Sunday, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. I also want to point out that in terms of parking for this facility, there is no parking for this facility. We don't anticipate anyone, well, not anyone, but we don't anticipate a lot of people wanting to come to this facility with their car. There are plenty of other facilities nearby that have parking. We are not one of those. We anticipate more people would be coming by, MBTA or by pedestrian or by bicycle traffic. In terms of loading our product to the facility, there is a loading zone directly outside, as you can see on the right, in front of the facility. This is what we're proposing as an entrance, as the facade. The Somerville zoning ordinance does require that there be certain specific guidelines around the front of the facade in terms of the display of the window area where you cannot see into the facility itself. And then that is also a CCC regulation. I'll show you a little more deep. Actually, if you can see on the floor plan, you can see this display window area here, which has been set back to allow for compliance with the SEO. The lower right is a photo of Seed's operation in JP. It's a very bright, well-maintained entrance. They happen to be in the basement, so you don't see their picture windows in the JP location, but you do see this very prominent door and entrance, and you'll get that feel a little bit on this side here with their orange kind of trademark door and their Seed logo with a understated gray painted masonry storefront. In terms of transportation and access, we've spent a lot of time, energy, and resources in having a traffic study conducted by Fuss & O'Neill, who I believe joins us on this call, and learned a lot through that process. We've provided that in our submitted materials. I guess I would call out a couple of things. One is that as part of this process, we would be citing a bike rack in front of the building to create a more desirable place for people to bike to our store, or encourage biking to our stores. I would also point out that the traffic study revealed that there were only 5 additional trips during the afternoon weekdays from what the previous use of a liquor store was, according to the traffic engineer study. And again, I have to tell you, I don't think a lot of people are going to be hopping in their car to get to this particular location. There are better locations that have parking, but according to that data that's provided by the engineers, just 5 additional trips would be anticipated at this location. And on the weekend, there would be 34 additional vehicle trips during the Saturday peak hour compared to the previous land use. And the result there of that traffic study was a conclusion by Fuss and O'Neill that there would not be an impact, negative impact to the existing conditions. We have a security plan for your perusal, and having submitted this, we're happy to go into this in greater detail. These are real requirements through the CCC, and I imagine we'll get into this a little bit when we go through the licensing board. One of the things we looked at was Summer Vision 2040 and thinking about supporting small businesses, adding jobs, supporting the local arts. One of the things that we want to do is to put local artistry, artwork in our windows. It was something that the economic department encouraged us to do as well in their notes. And it's something we'd be happy to do. It's something we'd like to do. And we do feel like this is a consistent use, consistent with what the MR4 zoning district calls for. We believe will be a positive impact for this community. There are a number of things that we're going to do beyond even just hiring. And we are looking to partner with local nonprofit communities such as the Mystic Activity Center, Peabody House, Teen Empowerment, Somerville Cares About Prevention, Cambridge Health Alliance, and other support of local arts, etc. We have a very diverse team. One of the things that April really wants to do is hire people who are also women-owned business. For example, our general contractor is a local woman-owned business. There's just a more detailed timeline that, we get into it. But I'll pause there, Madam Chair, and see if there are any comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ross. I do have one question before we jump in, which is if we can go back to the map with the density of locations. I could be wrong, but I thought my memory was that there was an additional dispensary approved for 620 Broadway. Is that currently being shown here?
This is like I apologize if that's the case. We could probably do a fast Google for you and find it. If you're telling me that you think it was approved and it's not being shown there, I'm gonna trust that you're accurate. And with apologies.
I just think that's an important, to the extent that this was intended to show the distribution. I'm not sure if that applicant is proceeding or open.
Yeah.
I wonder if staff has any information on the status of that one.
This is Steve Carey in the Planning Division. Don't have an update on their status. They have been through the permitting process, though.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions to the applicant from the board before we open it up to public testimony? Okay. With that, we will open it up for the public hearing portion. I will ask anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to or express concern about the project to please use the raised hand function.
This is Steve Carey in the Planning Division. I am not seeing any hands raised.
Excellent. Closing that portion then and moving to anyone wishing to speak in support of the application.
Steve Carey in the Planning Division. Also not seeing any hands raised.
Madam Chair, we did have some people, I think, that were called earlier to find out when the meeting was, but I think I got an email from a gentleman who lives nearby by the name of Zach, but he may not be on, and if that's the case, again, apologies, but they did ask if they could attend because they wanted to speak in favor.
No
Thank-
problem. We will so we will close the spoken portion of testimony at this time, but we will leave we will continue this to our next meeting. So we will leave the written record open for anyone wishing to submit public comment in writing until Friday, August 9th at noon. And anyone can submit comments to planning@somervilema.gov and they will get to all of us ahead of our next conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so with that, I will turn to comments from my fellow board members on this application. Michael.
I just had a quick one. When I was going through some of the neighborhood notes, there were some comments around the activation of the frontage, and your team spoke a little bit about that in the journal area. I also heard some comments and interest in trying to display art or preferably local art. Is that something your team has kind of considered at all? Is that even allowed based on the CCC?
I'm sorry, is what allowed by the CCC?
Some type of activated storefront that's not necessarily cannabis related, like display of art or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we're anticipating that. There was in the Somerville staff report, they actually show an example of this, where they have the artwork kind of, and then the setback area. So
Yep.
we were anticipating doing something along those lines, something tasteful, something interesting, something that gets people to stop and look. Not cannabis, but something, art and that kind of stuff. We're not allowed to show product. So that's the idea behind that one.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. I think this group maybe got a lot of our cannabis retailer comments out of our systems earlier this evening. But it sounds like it's a quiet group tonight, so I will thank you for your presentation, and we will leave that written record open, and I will then, if no one has any other questions at this time, move to continue this case. Yes, Luke.
I'm really sorry, Amelia. I'm saying it, so I'll just say it. I see that in the staff memo, staff are recommending the condition that this be appointment only. I know we're not voting tonight, but this does have the transportation study. So, I guess we'll just decide at our next meeting if we want to include that condition or not, and I'll just preview. It seems reasonable to not have that condition applied to this one.
That's
But I guess, yeah.
Thank you for raising that, Luke. That's a great point. I wonder if sorry, what I'm thinking about is whether we would need any update to the traffic study to reflect a higher volume of consumers in a non-appointment model, or whether the traffic study as is sufficient to remove that condition if the board wishes to proceed in that way next meeting. I wonder if we could ask in the intervening time for an opinion from mobility on that front. Does that sound like an appropriate way to proceed? Understanding the desire to not have people go back to do needless traffic studies, but also the desire to have buy-in from mobility about whatever the final volumes and consequent traffic patterns are likely to be.
Hey, Madam Chair, I think I know what happened here. Maggie Roberts sent out her link to the people who wanted to get information on how to testify, and that they're all showing up as Maggie Roberts, but they're not. They are other people. So I apologize for that. So I don't know if they can speak or if they want to speak or how it goes.
I had noticed there were several Maggie Roberts.
I was trying to figure out what happened there. And finally, it dawned on me. I've done this before. I've done the
No
same.
problem.
Yeah.
All right. Unless anyone feels otherwise, let's reopen public testimony and get some comments out from the folks who have shown up to speak on this matter. Please state your name and address for the record when you are called on. Steve Carey, I do not know how you will differentiate amongst the people you intend to call on.
This is Steve Carey in the planning division. If one of the people who was going under the alias Maggie Roberts is able to use the raise hand function, I could then unmute you that way. I'm not sure if that's possible. I'm not seeing any hands being raised. unfortunately, we don't have the chat function working at the moment. They would also be able to join the meeting through the official link that was sent out by the city of Somerville, if they would prefer that. But again, I'm not seeing, so I can't just unmute at random because I'm not sure who I would be unmuting. They may also be able to modify their name in the Zoom function to reflect their actual identity.
Steve, I did see one hand go up, but I don't know where it went. There was one of the Maggies.
Just so folks listening know, the raise hand function should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen.
You know, when I first was on this, Steve, it didn't let me. Oh, it did let me raise my hand. Madam Chair, can I ask you one other question? It's been a while since I've been in front of the board of Somerville. The presentation and then the vote, is that standard to have the first meeting as a presentation and then to vote at a later meeting, or do you ever vote at the same meeting that you present?
Only in the very simplest cases do we typically take a vote on the same evening, especially in an item where we expect there to be written testimony and want to allow that period in between the case being opened and the receipt of any additional written materials. I don't want to speak for the board at large, but I would guess that we are prepared to vote on this at our next meeting in all likelihood. So it should be I would expect it to be a relatively quick process, but I think keeping that written testimony open seems particularly important so that all of our various Maggie Roberts can get their feedback to us ahead of the next session.
And one more question, I'm sorry. Do you expect me to come back at the next session and present again, or is this like a non-present type of situation?
We would hope that you could be available for any questions the board members may have come up with in the intervening time, but wouldn't expect another presentation unless there were specific items that you were being asked to address, which I have not heard any this evening. I think the one thing we would ask is, I'm not sure whether the applicant team or planning staff can take the lead on getting us an answer from mobility to Luke's question, or to the proposed resolution on Luke's question of whether we can have mobility's approval to accept the transportation study that was provided as valid if we approve this with a non-appointment only, without a condition for appointment only.
I understand that. I would say, I think Luke's question, if I could answer that, Madam Chair, I think Luke's question was intended to be helpful. But unfortunately, this traffic study is extremely expensive and it's very voluminous, more so than other cities that I appear before. So I would say that if, and there was a lot of pressure on the applicant to not only hire me and the architect and everyone else, but then she had to pay for this very expensive traffic study. So if she had to do another traffic study for something that was intended to help her by removing the appointment only thing, it would only exacerbate the problem in the first place. So I just wouldn't want to punish the applicant for doing the right thing, following the rules, and then finding that she has to do another I'm sure she would love to have the appointment only lifted. We all would. I mean, that's a no-brainer. But if it required her to submit another traffic study, it would be very expensive and almost unfair to have her do that again.
Completely understood. I apologize to the applicant team that you are hitting us at this moment of great indecision about how the board wishes to proceed on this question. I would say, and I'm looking to the other board members to indicate their agreement or not with this, that if you wish to coordinate with staff on the question of whether the current traffic study would be acceptable without the requirement for appointment only, we would, assuming no one has any further issues with this project, likely vote at our next meeting either to approve this permit with the existing traffic study and no appointment only condition if mobility gives their blessing, or with the existing traffic study and the existing appointment only condition as recommended by staff. But I wouldn't expect that to hold up the process in either instance. unless anyone feels differently, folks, please let me know if that doesn't seem like the right way to give ourselves flexibility here. Luke, okay, all right. If that's acceptable to the applicant, I think that's how we propose you proceed. Absolutely understand the goal to not trigger the need for an additional traffic study at this time.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully staff works with us on that because I fear that my applicant won't be able to afford the other 10,000. We'll watch all the other applicants not have appointment only, and she'll have to continue to have appointment only because she didn't want to come up with the other 12,000, 15,000 it costs to do this traffic study, and I would understand that. That why she wouldn't want to come up with that again, but hopefully staff will work with us on that.
I don't expect you to commence another traffic study in the next 2 weeks, so if staff identifies an issue with it, let's be prepared to discuss it on the 15th. Is that all right?
Yeah, but thank you for that and for the explanation. I do see a Maggie Roberts hand raised.
This is
Alright.
Steve Carey in the planning division. Yeah, I would be glad to reach out to mobility and facilitate getting that opinion from them. I am going to now, if it's okay, Madam Chair, I'm going to unmute one of the Maggie Roberts.
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're unmuted on our end. You'll just have to unmute yourself on your end.
Hi, this is, I think, unmuted Maggie Rogers. People can hear me. Is that correct? Okay, this is Catherine O'Shea. I am actually the transportation engineer who completed the traffic study. I'm a transportation engineer with Hudson O'Neill. I was just unmuting to share the point, and obviously we'll be deferring to the mobility judgment, but our trip generation estimates in the traffic study are not dependent on the appointment only operations. They're completely independent of that. So I wouldn't expect, based on the traffic study that we prepared, that we would need to prepare another one. Because no analysis that we did was sort of contingent on that condition. I just wanted to share that now, but it sounds like sort of after I initially raised my hand, we decided that we'll be checking with mobility and deferring to their judgment, and we're totally on board with that approach. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much for confirming that. I think that probably gives us all more comfort that we'll be able to proceed smoothly at the next meeting. That's great to hear. Thank you. Does anyone else on the board have any further comments or questions before we move to continue this and pick it up week after next? Okay, with that, I will move to continue this to our meeting on August 15th, seconded by Jahan. Steve, would you please call the roll?
This is Steve Carey in the planning division. Debbie Howard Easton,
Aye.
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Hi.
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
and Amelia Aba.
Aye. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, we will next take up the two recommendations to City Council on the items from our recent joint hearing. The first will be Morris Kala requesting a zoning map amendment to change the zoning of 5 Homer Square from neighborhood residence to urban residence, which was number 24-0607. I know we've received a number of pieces of written testimony following that joint hearing, and would open it up to my colleagues for discussion of that item. No big feelings? All right, if no one else wants to start, I will say this certainly has the look of a request for spot zoning in a neighborhood where it's not clear that there would be any real public benefit to accepting the proposed map change. So I'm unsure of the planning value of approving this request. How do others feel about it?
So
Michael?
I second those feelings.
As well here, I was looking back at my notes from the meeting and that was my, that was included in my notes there, spot zoning, question mark. So I'm also in agreement.
John?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I concur with my fellow board members.
Luke?
I'll just say, I'm generally, happy to upzone. I think we can use the housing. But I do think doing that in a broader way than parcel by parcel makes sense. So I still am persuaded that this isn't necessarily the most thoughtful way to do it in this case.
Right, thank you. So with that, I will, hearing the feedback from the board members, move that we make a recommendation to deny the requested zoning change. If folks wanted to discuss a recommendation of no recommendation, I'm open to feedback on that as well. All right, so we'll move then to recommend that the city council deny the requested zoning change, seconded by Jahan. Steve, could you please call the roll?
This is Steve Carey in the planning division. Debbie Howard Easton.
Aye.
Jahan Habib.
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
And Amelia Abach.
Aye. All right, thank you. Our next item is 14 registered voters requesting a zoning map amendment to change the zoning district of 136 School Street from urban residence to mid-rise 6, 95 Highland Ave from neighborhood residence to MR6, and 97, 99, 399A, 101 to 103, and 107 Highland from mid-rise 5 to mid-rise 6, file 24-0641. This, I believe, was the YMCA affiliated redevelopment proposal and map change to enable that. Does anyone have any comments or feedback on this one? Michael?
I would just say, this is a big resource for the city. I think the applicant made a great case that this brings back a lot of value to our community. And so I think this is a really positive thing overall. I also appreciate that the applicant was advocating for upzoning the kind of one parcel on the corner that isn't necessarily a part of the applicant, so they were being very considerate and thoughtful of trying to include their neighbor in this proposal. So I thought that was great as well. Obviously, it's also important to highlight that neighbor is not obligated to take down their building or change it in any way. So I think with all those points in mind, I'm actually very favorable of this this ask.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll say for my part, I tend to agree with Michael. I think this was a thoughtfully done proposal that was pretty contextual in light of the surroundings and sort of being at the civic hub there near the high school and city hall, and represents a strong resource and is a good use of this upzoning, and extending that to the adjacent parcel, I think, is also a reasonable request with an eye towards future expansion opportunity. So unless anyone has any feelings in opposition to this one, Debbie?
Oh, no, sorry.
All right, so I would be in support of a motion to recommend that the city council approve this application. All right. So I move that we recommend the city council approve this zoning change, seconded by Jahan. Steve, could you please call the roll?
This is Steve Carey in the planning division. Debbie Howard Easton.
Aye.
Jahan Habib.
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
And Amelia Abach.
Aye, thank you. All right, that takes us to the end of our sort of normal business, and then we also have an update this evening on the plan for Brick Bottom. And I understand we have a presentation from staff on that, and we'll then, while it is not a hearing, we will open it up to any public comment that folks who are on the meeting wish to provide regarding the plan. So we'll hand it over to you, Andrew.
Good evening. It's good to be here. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is something that it's been a long time in the making, and I don't think this body has seen a planning document in a couple of years now. So it's very exciting. And planning staff are thrilled to be able to present you on the Brick Bottom Neighborhood Plan at tonight's meeting. So as I said, it's been a long process, about 4 years. Most of the engagement happened during the pandemic, but we're pleased to be able to finally bring you a document and then an overview of that document tonight. Oops, I should share my screen. My apologies. Here we go. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, let's get going. So before Brick Bottom really accelerates, development really accelerates in Brick Bottom, there needs to be a shared vision for its future. Brick Bottom is undergoing change with pressures from projects like the Green Line extension and the community path, the Poplar Street pump station and art farm, and the 100 Chestnut commercial building that was recently built last year. A clear vision will help guide Brick Bottom's future character, atmosphere, and essential infrastructure. While input is invaluable throughout the development process, a comprehensive vision is crucial for guiding decisions across all private and public projects in this area. Just to remind everyone where Brick Bottom is located, it's located in a transform area according to Summer Vision 2040's vision map. Transformational areas are where we see prioritized planning efforts, new parks are created, commercial investments are located to help the city fiscally, and new housing opportunities to increase the housing supply in the city. So what is a neighborhood plan and what does it do? Neighborhood plans are detailed blueprints for specific Somerville areas. They dive deep into each neighborhood's unique character, history, and challenges. These plans cover a range of topics, including housing, economics, transportation, parks, sustainability, just to name a few. They help us align our neighborhood goals with the city's overall vision, that being Summer Vision 2040. But most importantly, neighborhood plans shape the future of our community by providing a roadmap for development, identifying shared priorities, and addressing key issues. There's a lot of opportunities in Brick Bottom. The MBTA Green Line Extension service. The GLX service is an essential part of the strategy to increase housing density while minimizing proportional increases in traffic. East Somerville Station can become a site for transit-oriented development with little or no parking. McGrath Boulevard. Once McGrath Highway becomes a boulevard, there will be a tremendous connectivity potential between Brick Bottom and the Union Square areas. Of course, local arts and creative industries. The current vibrant arts community at Joy Street Studios and the Brick Bottom Arts Building is an invaluable resource. Enhancing the current community and expanding opportunities for arts and creative enterprises would strengthen Brick Bottom and become a vibrant arts district. Connections to other transformational areas such as Interbelt. The transformational development potential of Interbelt will provide a great opportunity to build synergy between the two areas. Crossing the rail lines will allow the diverse workforce of Interbelt to easily participate in the dynamic activities in Brick Bottom. Community path. The community path offers a unique opportunity for accessing Brick Bottom by walking or biking without concerns about vehicle traffic. More access points into the path will further increase use of the path itself and its overall safety. New street connections. New street connections create opportunities to produce walkable, bikeable, and green street designs. Based on community feedback, conversations with stakeholders, citywide documents, and older planning efforts, as outlined, the following broad goals for Brick Bottom were established. These goals inform the vision and recommendations of the plan. And these are: create a complete neighborhood, support arts and creative uses, improve access and connectivity, design sustainably with a pedestrian focus, and support economic development. Oh, I guess I had, oops. All right, so these priorities inform the plan objectives. those being art and culture, economic development, land use and urban design, mobility, housing. We will dive into each of those, just to touch on them a bit. So art and culture. Preserving and expanding artist workspaces and addressing affordability, protecting existing studios, creating new ones, and fostering collaboration through shared spaces. Creating a platform for artistic expression, establishing galleries, performance venues, and public art opportunities. Integrating art into the neighborhood, making art a central element in Brick Bottom's development from landscaping to infrastructure. Establishing an arts management organization, which would oversee district development, coordinating art programs, and planning and marketing the Brick Bottom Arts District. Fostering community engagement, connecting artists with youth, organizing art events, and involving the community in the planning process. Essentially, the plan aims to solidify Brick Bottom's identity as a vibrant arts and creative-oriented district by supporting artists, creators in creating more art spaces and integrating art into the fabric of the neighborhood. Economic development. Brick Bottom aims to foster a stable and robust economy that benefits both residents and businesses. A diverse mix of industries is essential for job creation, community services, and economic resilience. While the growing research and development sector is positive, it's crucial to preserve Brick Bottom's artistic and light industrial character and not let one sector overshadow others. The plan emphasizes the economic value of the arts and suggests strategies to support artists and creative businesses. It also calls for city support in streamlining business permits and offering incentives to encourage new businesses and active storefronts. Recognizing potential development delays, the summary proposes interim solutions like pop-up shops and art installations to activate the neighborhood in the short term. Land use and urban design. The Brick Bottom neighborhood plan envisions a transformational area from a car-centric area with limited open space into a vibrant, walkable community. It aims to achieve this through creating a complete neighborhood with a mix of uses, including residential, commercial, and creative and artistic spaces, prioritizing sustainability, enhancing natural light, more trees, and focusing on environmentally friendly practices, developing new public spaces, allocating at least 20% of the land for parks, plazas, and community gathering areas, driving economic growth, encouraging a mix of uses while preserving the arts district. Protecting Brick Bottom's character, maintaining the area's unique funky vibe and architecture and within open spaces. This section also includes design guidelines for redevelopment. These could be considered for new development when new development does happen in the neighborhood through the design review process. Mobility. There's current challenges in Brick Bottom. Brick Bottom has poor connectivity and safety issues for pedestrians and cyclists. We need to create a neighborhood where getting around is easy and enjoyable for all modes of transportation. To do this, we need to improve infrastructure, continue to collaborate, and make sure that the Brick Bottom Boulevard project happens, and expand connections to other areas. Prioritize safety, implement the Vision Zero and bicycle network plans in Brick Bottom, create protected bike lanes, and improve pedestrian safety. Manage parking, establish parking caps, prioritizing underground parking, and exploring transportation management association, similar to what happens in Assembly. Enhance public transit. Collaborate with the MBTA to improve bus service, support regional rail and potential Silver Line projects, and explore a potential commuter rail station at the East Somerville T-stop. Housing. Brick Bottom is identified as a key area for new housing development in Somerville to meet the goals outlined in Summer Vision 2040. The plan emphasizes creating a vibrant, complete neighborhood that supports both residents and artists. Artist housing, a portion of new housing units will be dedicated to artists, including live-work spaces and shared workspaces. High-density housing, building high-density housing near the Green Line station will create a walkable and mixed-use neighborhood and transit-oriented development. The plan also outlines key areas within Brick Bottom, that being Washington Street, Joy Street, Poplar Street, Chestnut Street, and then finally the intersection of Linwood and Fitchburg. So starting with Washington Street, Brick Bottom's main entrance at Washington and Joy Streets. A new plaza with public art will greet visitors arriving by train, bus, bike, or foot, providing clear access to the Green Line station and community path. Crosswalks will improve will be approved, and then intersection design will consider a potential silver line extension plans if feasible and with collaboration with the MBTA. Upper story residents near the station will be paired with ground floor active uses catering to residents and plaza visitors. Setbacks from the street will allow for wider sidewalks, bike lanes, and new street trees. Joy Street. Joy Street is envisioned as a high-density corridor with mixed-use buildings featuring courtyards or following a long and narrow design to maximize space. The street itself will be redesigned as a complete street with enhanced pedestrian and cyclist priority. A new greenway or public space is planned at the curve of Joy Street. New cross streets connecting to Linwood Street are suggested to improve connectivity with buildings on the block designed to integrate with the new green space. Finally, a more direct pedestrian connection to the Green Line station from within Brick Bottom is recommended. Poplar Street. Poplar Street is envisioned as a vibrant green main street with public spaces, art-focused businesses, and a connection to the community path. Art Farm at the beginning of the street offers space for urban agriculture, performances, and the planned pump station. Actually, I should say the in development pump station. A new plaza with public art is planned for the other end, providing permanent access to the community path, and a potential central park could connect the two, creating a linear green corridor and event space. Temporary art and retail uses in shipping containers or similar structures could activate the area during redevelopment. Chestnut Street. This central block in Brick Bottom should be redeveloped with a mix of art and creative uses with lower building heights compared to areas closer to the Green Line station. A new public square and pocket plaza with public art, possible water features, and seating amenities are planned to improve pedestrian experience and create a respite area. Chestnut Street will be redesigned as a complete street with bike lanes, water sidewalks, and trees to enhance the pedestrian experience. Finally, Fitchburg and Linwood Streets. Brick Bottom Artist Building, the neighborhood's sole residential building, sits along the southern tip of Fitchburg Street, a unique area with preserved cobblestone pavement. Squires Bridge creates a barrier at the moment for pedestrians due to its narrow sidewalk and neglected staircase. The upcoming McGrath transformation offers an opportunity to improve this connection by realigning Somerville Avenue extension, otherwise known as Scary Way, and potentially creating a more pedestrian-friendly route to and from this residential area. So implementation, you may have seen that we do have an implementation table in the sort of appendix area of the plan. This implementation table organizes the recommendations in chapters 4 and 5 into a more organized manner for implementation purposes. It includes time frame, which for this for each item, which would be short-term action or a long-term change. Responsible party that is responsible for planning, implementing, and or tracking. Complexity is a recommendation an easy win or more of a heavy lift. The importance level, is this a critical item that needs to be addressed? And if any additional planning is necessary. For example, to create an arts district, there needs to be a strategic plan for a Brick Bottom Arts District, as the plan has specific purposes, just as this neighborhood plan has specific purposes. So I know that was a short presentation, but we staff didn't want to keep it long, as we know you probably have some questions and comments, and we wanted to provide time for that discussion and also hear from the public. So thank you so much. I'll be here. Sarah Lewis is also here to answer questions. And yeah, happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And thank you to staff, because I know this plan has been in the works for a while, and this was a very thorough and thoughtful document. So thanks to everyone who worked on it and got it to the finish line. If there are any brief comments from the board, I'm happy to have us discuss them now, but otherwise I'd like to open it up to public comment and continue our discussion after that. Okay. All right. So with that, we will go ahead and open it up to public testimony. This is, again, not a hearing, but also not a dialogue. So I think just an opportunity. I guess I'll defer to staff on this one as to whether you want to answer questions from anyone in the audience or simply take public feedback, because this is outside the normal structure of a hearing.
I'm happy to answer questions from the community.
All right. So folks can still stand by the norm of giving your name and residential street. but please let us know if you'd like to give feedback or ask questions. Yes, Andrew.
I'm gonna ask if Sarah Lewis can be promoted. Actually, I probably can do that myself. Sorry about that. I just want to make sure that she's in here with us. Thank you.
No problem.
This is Steve Carey in the planning division. I did just promote Sarah to panelist.
People, please use the raised hand function if you wish to give a comment. Hi, Sarah.
This is Steve Carey in the planning division. I'm not seeing, oh, I do see a Joshua Michelle with their hand raised, and a William Valletta. Joshua, I'm gonna unmute you on our end. You'll have to unmute on your end.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can.
Cool. I appreciate the thoughtful design of how the transportation fits into this
Sorry
Brookwater
to
plan.
interrupt. If you don't mind just stating
Oh.
your name and address for the record, that'd be
My
great.
apologies. I'm Joshua Michel at 1D Clark Street. I appreciate the deep thought on the planning of transportation around this neighborhood. And I do like the amount of parks in the neighborhood. However, I am concerned about all the courtyard spaces that have been included in it as space that could be used to make the buildings taller and have more housing instead of having that park space to alleviate a lot of the housing issues that we're seeing in the city. I think that maybe having slightly less green space in trade-off for maybe green roofs and more housing might be a possibility. Thank you.
Next up, I see Bill Valletta. Bill, I'm gonna unmute you on our end. You'll have to unmute on your end. Bill, you should be able to speak now. Mr. Valletta, if you're trying to speak, we are unable to hear you. Mr. Valletta, I'm gonna lower your hand. If you are able to resolve your audio issue, please raise your hand again and we'll be glad to call on you. But I guess I would suggest the board continue with their discussion.
And Andrew, maybe you can, or Andrew or Simon, maybe one of you can give us just a bigger picture, sort of, if folks are unable to provide comment tonight due to technical difficulties or were unable to join us, what other avenues, what are the right avenues, since this is again outside the context of a hearing, for providing any additional feedback to the city?
Yeah, absolutely. They can provide written comments to us, and please send them to planningboard@somervillema.gov. You also feel free to reach out to me. My email is just my first initial, my last name at somervillema.gov. You can also reach out to Sarah Lewis, but the best email is definitely the planning board at somervillema.gov.
Madam Chair, if I may, I believe we received written comment for Mr. Valletta as well. So I wanted to just also bring that to your attention, but if hopefully Bill can get the audio suggested worked out.
Thank you. Do we have any other hands?
This is Steve Carey in the planning division. I do not see any other hands raised.
Okay. We will keep an eye for anyone else who might raise their hand, or if Mr. Valletta is able to get his audio working. But in the meantime, we can turn to, I think, discussion amongst the board and any questions or comments that we have for staff. Debbie.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question generally for Andrew, and I suspect this may be somewhere in the plan, and I might not have seen it, and I appreciate this was, a great effort over the course of 4 years, but do you have a sense, sort of maybe percentage-wise, what the level of participation was amongst, residents in the community, including, artist tenants and business tenants and, other property owners in the Brick Bottom area.
Sure, absolutely. But I'm actually going to defer to Sarah Lewis, as she was more involved with those efforts prior to my time with the city. So Sarah, could you answer that question?
Through the chair, absolutely. This is one of those tricky questions. Whatever I answer here, somebody's going to argue with me. We did reach out to we had lots of meetings with the Brick Bottom Artist Building folks, and the Joy Street Studios, who are the most, the active. We unfortunately did not get terrific participation from the current business owners, but that is not unusual. Mostly because there's a lot of Eversource controlled properties in Brick Bottom at the moment as well. So we had started this process as a scrambled, we were planning on doing it as a full-on participation. The world shut down in March 2020, and so we scrambled a little bit to sort of figure out what we could do remotely. We have since, part of the reason that the project has been delayed is we did the fiscal analysis that was asked of us, and have had an opportunity to have in-person meetings since. So I feel like we have a fair amount of participation from the residents and the artists in the neighborhood, but I'm sure you may hear differently from the residents and the artists.
Thank you, sir.
I see we have a hand in the order I saw. I think I saw Michael, and then I saw Jennifer Schultz in the audience. If you don't mind, should we go to Jennifer first? Michael, is that okay? Steve, can I ask for your help?
My apologies. Yes. I'm unmuting Jen Schultz.
There we go. I think that worked. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak. So I am Jennifer Schultz, and I am planning counsel on behalf of actually many of the owners in the Brick Bottom Innerbelt neighborhood. And this evening am speaking on behalf of the North River Leerink partnership that owns and controls the 100 Chestnut Street building that has been built and is almost entirely leased up. The adjacent, what hopefully will be a 200 Chestnut building, the adjacent building at 86 Joy Street. And then also, although not relevant this evening, the approximately 7 acres directly across the Green Line extension, technically into the Innerbelt neighborhood. So we did just a few hours ago submit by Doug Gensler a comment letter. Understood if not everyone or even no one has had the chance to read it, given that we caught you in the middle of what I'm sure is a busy day. So I guess I would ask if I should read the letter or if you would like me to paraphrase, whatever would be the most helpful thing for me to do this evening.
I would suggest that you paraphrase, because I don't think we've received that letter yet, but I don't expect that we will take a vote to adopt this plan this evening. So we will all have the opportunity to read it in full ahead of that adoption.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you, Chairwoman Aboff. So I'll go through just the major topics that we commented on in the letter, and just to set the context for anyone who doesn't know or hasn't been present and part of the first round of development by the North River Lyric Companies. A couple years ago, we proceeded forward through site plan review under the CI zoning that existed for 100 Chestnut Street to come forward, develop and construct an approximately 200,000 square foot lab R&D office commercial building at what has become at the corner of Chestnut and Fitchburg, what we now call 100 Chestnut Street. That building opened a little bit under a year ago, and at this date is, if not 100% leased, nearly there, within a couple percentage points, which is very exciting, I think, to everyone. Includes some local tenants, great artist and eating space on the ground floor, and then also a lot of really exciting lab and R&D companies that we were really excited to bring into the neighborhood. So with that successful development now underway, we have had a keen eye towards the neighborhood plan and ultimate rezoning coming out, with the hope that it would help us to continue the positive momentum of bringing great employers, businesses, and tenants and users to the Brick Bottom neighborhood. And in addition, continuing to collaborate with our artist neighbors and in addition, the Form Energy that's directly across the tracks that is also a tenant of a related company. So with that said, we have done a careful review of the draft plan and really appreciate its compelling policy to bring both, in live and civic spaces, artist spaces, affordable housing, new street network, amenities, and great businesses to this area. A few areas that we would like to comment on where we have concerns, but hope that with just a little bit of, I guess, tweaking or revision, that everything could be created as a win-win for sort of all parties involved. So the first item that we were concerned to see is that there's one use that is called out in the draft plan to require a special permit. Whereas there are no references to other uses requiring that relief, and that one use is for lab and R&D space. And given that we were able to move in the underlying zoning, which of course still exists today, with the lab and R&D space as of right, and that in under a year in a very challenging market, we're able to completely lease up the building with really great tenants for the neighborhood, adding to us what seems like a sort of puzzling discretionary approval for a use that has proven that it can and probably should be one of the most significant economic drivers to the area, is something that we would like to see revised, that this not be sort of brought to a higher or heavier burden just in terms of zoning, and that instead any particular development that comes forward be tested and tried through a site plan review process to ensure that any impacts of that individual project are accounted for, mitigated against, but that one use that has so much promise and has already proved itself, we think, does not have that additional hurdle attached to it. The next item that we wanted to comment on and would appreciate, I think, some clarity is the provision in the plan that the total floor area of all new development be at least 40% residential. So if what that is intended to mean is that there's a desire for approximately 40% of Brick Bottom as an overall neighborhood to be residential, we have no objection, no concern. We support it. If what it means is that every single proposed project to be developed must be residential, then we are very concerned. I see Sarah. It was a back and forth, and then an up and down. So hopefully we misunderstand, and it is not every single proposed project that needs to be 40% residential. Instead, it is neighborhood wide. So all right, we can check that one off the list. Fantastic. I won't even go on. So moving on, we wanted to also comment on the requirement that's set forth in the plan for 20% AC and E space. We do understand that this is intended to be an arts neighborhood, or continue to be, and further supported for future use as an arts neighborhood. Nevertheless, a 20% AC and E requirement would be a multiple of what is required everywhere else in the city. Generally, the default that we have seen, I believe, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, that is 5% is the default, with the overlays, at least some of them increasing that to a 10% AC&E. And so what we would ask is that instead of requiring the 20% AC&E, which really does have a significant capital expenditure and price tag attached to it for that use of floor area, that it be instead written as incentives for that additional AC&E space, so that it be treated more on par with the other, newer transformative neighborhoods. We would just hate for there to be any provision that makes it so that the decision ultimately becomes nothing or something, as opposed to sort of what can be done with creative approaches to financing and development. Moving on is just in general, we are hoping to see ultimately, and whether this is in the neighborhood plan or in the new zoning overlay, that there be a commitment to density and height, especially along the railroad tracks, which I think generally speaking is, a geographical area in any neighborhood where height and density can often be better absorbed. But certainly, especially all of the properties in Brick Bottom that are along the railroad tracks are pretty narrow, or I suppose I should say the remaining lots to be developed along the tracks get narrower and narrower as you get further and further away from 100 Chestnut. And so for those purposes, things like additional height where you just don't have the floor space, and even a consideration of the widths of sidewalks and setbacks to ensure that usable floor plates for both actually residential and commercial space, as you really have an eye towards just how narrow or narrow, I suppose narrow is the right word, those lots get as you move down the tracks. I did also just want to comment, in particular, the neighborhood plan includes a reference in it to a commitment for certain relocation and I guess the result of relocation of any artist space in Brick Bottom. And we would simply ask, although my client is committed to that not be written into a plan that feels like a little bit of an encroachment into the private agreements between landlords and tenants, and sort of anything along those lines. Again, aspirational goals, indications that this is the intent, absolutely no objection to, but it did make us a little bit uneasy to see what felt like a statement by staff of a promise by a private party to do something in particular that ultimately really is a landlord-tenant item. And then moving on, and I am actually almost done, we would ask that loading requirements, instead of having a requirement that ultimately becomes part of zoning, be something that is dealt with through site plan review. And this is something that, having gone through the development of 100 Chestnut, we actually feel particularly well suited to comment on. For that property, like sort of many of the others, we had frontage on 2 streets and then the railroad tracks behind. And ultimately, because there was a strong desire from both the artist lofts and the city not to have loading on the side of the building. On the Fitchburg side, we did end up, as everyone knows, with loading on the frontage of that building. And while we understand that that may often or even frequently not be the desired location for loading, generally speaking, on the front of a building, we would nevertheless ask that that remain a case-by-case basis review through the site plan review process, especially when we look at the properties that my client owns and controls, understanding that although there will not be streets on more than one side, if there's going to be civic spaces surrounding every building, we don't want to be in a position where we would have to ask for a variance from zoning or from brand new zoning in order to put a loading dock on a civic space if we are prohibited from doing it on our only street frontage. And so that was something that stuck out to us. And then finally, we would ask regarding the parking that is referenced and set forth in the draft plan that indicates that a parking cap should be determined, set, and regulated district-wide, especially just given the varied uses that are intended and expected to be in this area. Residential, which has very different parking needs from lab, tech, R&D, different times of day, different needs for cars. We understand that this is on the train. So of course, every incentive to use public transit. But again, that is simply not something that can always be the case, especially in these lab and R&D buildings when people are traveling outside of regular business hours, evening, early mornings, weekends, et cetera. And so again, we would ask, similar to loading, that this be something that is determined on a case-by-case basis during site plan review when looking at the very specific use, the specific building, the specific proposed program, and that a determination, as is sort of usual throughout the city, be done with mobility and the planning department and the permit granting authority. So that is my paraphrase, believe it or not.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Attorney Schultz, I can't imagine how long the full letter must be. We look forward to reading it.
Thank you.
I believe we were going back to Michael McNeely.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I ask, so at the July 9th land use joint meeting, the brick bottom iPod was discussed. And there was a lot of great community feedback that I think also can kind of be applied into this whole effort as well. Can someone just kind of level set for me how this fits into the iPod and the order of operations with all that, just to make sure I understand and anybody else in the public who might be confused as well?
Sure. I think mainly the goal of the iPod is to sort of not necessarily pause all development, but give time for new comprehensive zoning in Brick Bottom to occur. Typically, right, you develop a plan, like in this case, we have the neighborhood plan that's in front of you. Then after there'd be a separate process to develop the zoning for Brick Bottom. We're not sure what the timeline looks like for that, but that's why the iPod is, I believe, set at 18 months or until the adoption of such zoning. We seem to be on track. Which is great. So really at this point, we're waiting for this, the council to ultimately adopt that iPod, but also ultimately adopt this plan so we can start the zoning process. But the iPod really is a tool to allow staff to work on that zoning from a holistic standpoint. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Yep.
Madam Chair, do you mind if I keep going or do you want? Okay. So, one of the things, like I said, I'm going to reference the iPod comments a little bit because I think they were another form of public testimony that was valuable. A lot of the stuff that came up was, trying to find a way to protect the artists, and it obviously comes with a lot of seriousness in the proposal, right? I believe Attorney Schultz even highlighted, the target for 20% AC and E space. So clearly, that's something you're taking very seriously here, and I really I appreciate that we're kind of hearing that feedback and trying to support it. I also really appreciate the goal here in trying to activate storefronts and connect this neighborhood more to the surrounding areas. I think this is excellent stuff. I think it's actually going to allow us to better touch and interact with that art, because I know there are various art spaces around Somerville that I personally feel are a little bit more approachable. So I think it's awesome that that's a big focus point here. And so that's just a couple of high level likes that I wanted to kind of promote. And then on the questions front, I first wanted to ask, I know you mentioned that Eversource owns a bunch of property here. Have we been engaging Eversource and other, relationships, MWRA, DPU, stuff like that in this process? And have they had some thoughts or comments that you can highlight maybe?
Through the chair, we have reached out to all of the business owners. There is a monthly meeting that a couple of divisions actually have with Eversource, so they are aware of this neighborhood plan. But that as a utility, it is difficult for them to do a facilities master plan, for lack of a better term. So we know that there are a number of elements in this that will take longer than others to redevelop. And sort of that's probably one of those areas. So, but as Andrew mentioned in his presentation, we have been talking about perhaps having them use part of their parking areas for pop-up events and things like that. So that's part of the recommendations. And so, sort of as a reminder, sort of these are recommendations, and it's a vision rather than being a regulatory document. So,
Right.
there's a lot of work to make it real coming.
Sure. That's great. Actually, that's even better than I was expecting in some regards. I was taking this from an infrastructure perspective, not a host space for these extracurriculars, but that's great if we're getting that kind of feedback already. I guess to turn it back to the utility element here, through this proposal, you probably have a vision on the amount of extra residential units that are going to be here, the amount of extra industrial lab space, et cetera. Barring aside the possibility of data centers, which are obviously going to require a lot more power, we probably have some expectations on projected load growth that might come from this. When you think about, some of the process we went through with the substation upgrade in Union Square, I'm wondering if Eversource hasn't had the opportunity to maybe comment on some solution here as well. And the reason I bring it up all the way at this planning stage is this is a great opportunity for us to look at like underground substations or things like that. Are these things that are kind of part of the process as well?
Through the chair, yes. It is difficult to. So for example, I'm going to give you an example. So the underground substation in Kendall Square was apparently paid for by the development community who saw the value in having the open space instead of facing, sort of a substation. So that is the example, is one that we've heard and we've talked through with the utility company a fair bit. Somerville will need another substation, probably sort of on the eastern side of the city. Until right now, Eversource is doing some major transmission line upgrades to connect. It's not just Somerville, but it's connecting Station 402, which is our substation in Union Square, to substations in Cambridge, to the larger facility in Everett. So as they sort of work through what those transmission line upgrades are, we're anticipating to have a better idea of where in the area, whether that's Somerville, whether that's Charlestown, whether that's, sort of expanding Everett. We don't know at this point in time. But it is something that we do have in the back of our minds, and those conversations have begun already.
Awesome. That's great. And yeah, I do recognize this is a bigger issue than just Somerville, right? So obviously it's still in the works, but this sounds like a great opportunity to consider solving that problem at the same time. I guess my next and probably my last question for the evening is kind of around highlighting any city or state-owned properties in this area. I don't know if I saw a visual that quickly highlighted that, but I'd be interested in seeing, just an overlay of what we have control over today. I've been seeing some great use of the Home Insight over in Gilman Square, and I think that's been a really successful opportunity to take something that is city controlled and do something special with that. And I would love to see if there's a visual that helps us understand how this space might be similar in one way or another.
Through you, Madam Chair. Michael, yes, that's a great question. The one parcel that the city does own, are you seeing my screen, by the way? I have it up again.
Not currently, no.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Press the wrong button, but we're good. We're good now. I wanted to show you the one parcel that the city does have control over. Still not seeing my screen, are you?
No,
Okay.
no, although it is the art farm site.
Yes,
And I
thank you,
put,
Sarah.
yeah, I put that in air quotes only because right now it's a ginormous hole in the ground. So it's gonna be the underground tank and the pump station, but that will have a significant open space on the top of it. And there is intended to be actually learning opportunities for what happens with stormwater as well. So there's thoughts about education to be incorporated in all of that.
And it's also a great highlight of proactive infrastructure planning, right? And being able to kind of do that before you build the space up. So that's just a big win overall. Yeah. Okay, that's all I got. Thank you very much.
Michael, I just want to say thank you for honing in on the question of sort of future Eversource needs and where they might fit into this neighborhood plan, because that was one of my questions as well, as we have this unique opportunity to map out, where we want different uses at this moment in time, and understanding that Eversource is also in the odd position of being a stakeholder and landowner here. If there is anything we can do to try to proactively shepherd a new substation into a specific geography that is most ideal from a planning perspective, I for one would certainly welcome the city experimenting and seeing how that goes, understanding that Eversource may or may not play ball. Thoughts from others? I had just a couple of minor questions, if you don't mind. So this is also the first time we've had a neighborhood plan come up since the stretch code went into effect, and since we've had sort of a few years of what the higher sustainability standards for buildings really look like. And as I was looking through a lot of the sort of precedent building types and images that were included, I kept sort of doing a double take and being like, oh, don't know if you could build that one now. Oh, not so sure about that. And there are a few details in the design standards that are called out, as well as some of those precedent images that I know P&Z is generally very good at internal coordination, but before we go and put this in as a final version, is there any additional input, or has sustainability sort of fully absorbed some of these recommendations as far as like the amount of glazing that's recommended? Because I'm not sure in some of I'm out of my depth here, but I have an instinct that some of the glazing percentages that are sort of recommended as preferred might not be that compatible with a residential building that was going for passive house certification, for instance, which I think is a standard that we would hope new residential development is. I noted there was also a recommendation for sort of dark metal grid windows. It's fine if the recommendation is for the appearance of dark metal grid windows, but metal being a thermal break, I think we don't actually want metal grid windows. Similarly, there was a note about sort of like E or F shaped buildings with long corridors. Absolutely agree that from a planning perspective, that would be a strong building typology, but I don't know if we will get the volume of development and investment that we might be aiming for in this area if we specify a building type that has such a high skin to floor ratio. And I'm not sure how those goals interact with the broader economic development goals, but I would just ask that we potentially take a slightly closer look at some of those before we, or at least at the step before they make it into like design guidelines that are actually in the ordinance, to make sure that they're totally talking to what the sustainability standards call for in practice.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for that comment. I think that's very insightful. And we have worked with OSC with this plan development, but I don't believe they were necessarily really involved with the design guidelines. So this is something that we can bring to them and their staff and have those conversations. And thank you for bringing this to our attention. They were really meant to sort of aspire for more of that industrial character. So yes, some of the examples may not necessarily be practical. It was really illustrative purposes, I would say, but it's definitely something we can take a second look at before things are finalized. Sarah, do you want to add anything?
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Madam Chair.
Well, I was just gonna say, I absolutely agree with sort of the design, the neighborhood character that you were trying to encourage maintenance of with those, and I don't mean to push back on them arbitrarily. I just want to make sure that if we are, as always, looking for developers to come into the city and be able to invest and be able to sort of build things that are to the standards we're looking for, that we're not setting them a task that is maybe literally impossible under the stretch code.
Sure, absolutely.
And then I was wondering if you could share any updates. I know that this is far, far from under our control, but the grounding of McGrath certainly seems like an important element of this plan. Do we have any thoughts on which generation it will happen in?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is a great question. There actually is some resurfacing work that's being done on McGrath Highway right now, down the road near Twin City Plaza. That's a separate project, but it's a good sign that things are moving along from the state's perspective. The state, I believe, has funding and to begin in 2027 is the date they're aiming to start that project. Now, of course, will it happen in 2027? We don't know. That's just reality. We can, cross our fingers and hope that that is the case, because that state level investment is critical for Brick Bottom's development, as well as sort of that eastern part of the city. So our mobility division is working closely with MassDOT staff to make sure that that vision does happen, in fact, happen in the city. And they really are the ones who are fighting for this development to happen in a timely manner.
Thank you. So in light of that, two follow-up questions. One, are there any interventions that can be made for not the permanent solution, but maybe the lower cost solution for improvements to pedestrian connectivity in the short term? I know there were some notes on sort of like quick build bike lane solutions, but I also saw that improvements to the Scary Way staircase were in the like long-term heavy lift category. And if we think that we are 5 years plus, I think that's actually also very optimistic from being able to execute on the McGrath. Like, is there anything else we can do to facilitate what's there now and what could be there from a development perspective in the next few years? Having, as the city thinks about prioritizing, anything that we can do to not pin all of our hopes and dreams on that happening soon, but make strategic improvements where possible in the near term, I personally would be very much in favor of. And then as we think about what it will look like to ground McGrath Highway, is there any, if we think that it will happen eventually, is there any thought that is worth giving at this stage to what the staging area for that would be, insofar as any of it would land in this neighborhood? And I know that's sort of a crazy question and maybe beyond the purview of this plan. But is it, Sarah's nodding like this is a nightmare she's had before.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll let also Sarah chime in too, to address some of the short-term stuff and other more city level investments. There is plans to make some mobility and pedestrian improvements along Poplar Street. in conjunction with Art Farm and the Poplar Street Pump Station, which the city does have funding for through capital improvements. So we're excited about that opportunity to invest in that section of Brick Bottom. But regarding what we can do in the short term that, would maybe help address some of those challenges that we're facing. Our mobility staff is challenged with these things every day. Unfortunately, there's other areas too that get prioritized in the city. So our hope is that we can just make sure that Brick Bottom is kept in the limelight. That's my first initial thought with that. In terms of where material would be staged for the grounding project. Unfortunately, I can't answer that. Sarah might have been able to give a better response, but my guess is that that's something that's worked out between the state and mobility and DPW and engineering of where that occurs and where that goes. So Sarah, do you want to chime in on that? Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, Andrew, you are not wrong. It is obviously a quagmire. Now there's a couple of things going on, and please stop me if I'm getting a little too wonky. So the Squires Bridge obviously has to remain as that goes over the tracks. So at some point, sort of I'm going to call them the service roads as they come down from the bridge will remain. That means because there is additional lanes on the side of what is already the highway dimension, the right-of-way is extra wide. So I don't know this for a fact, but because there's the state will have the extra right-of-way width to whether that's a staging area, whether that's temporary access ways, as the bridge, the highway itself comes down and distributes traffic onto the surface roads. I think there's enough play there. Now, in the long run, what of course we, the city and the neighborhood would love is, sort of for those slip lanes to completely go away and actually become developable land, because in a lot of instances, the idea that we could, for those of you that know the Union Square neighborhood plan, Milk Square on the one side of it, and then Art Farm on the other side of McGrath, if those became larger, that would be great. But these are all things that are, sort of too soon to tell. But I think depending on the development of other sites, so I could almost see MassDOT also leasing perhaps the 200 McGrath site, depending on whether the development of that happens. They often do that as they're working on these larger transportation projects, is they will lease land.
Thank you. I was coming at it from the perspective of, I would hate for the city to be making a big investment in public space and something that was then going to become eminent domain staging for something, right? I'm glad to hear it doesn't. It sounds like things will, that's not an imminent threat that I've made up. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so we will, I don't think we have sort of a standard process for the approval of a neighborhood plan since we haven't reviewed one in a while. I would imagine that the right next steps here are to wait for any feedback, such as the letter that Attorney Schultz referenced, to come in, and then resume this item at our next meeting or a few meetings out if staff prefers, to vote on sort of recommended modifications and overall approval. Is that the path that staff would recommend? Andrew?
Madam Chair, in terms of a comment period, we probably recommend just establishing the same written comment period as any other public hearing case. So the Friday before the next scheduled meeting by 12 for those comments. In regards to recommendations that you all would like to add, I think that is appropriate in this case, to do that during the motion for the ultimate plan incorporates those ideas. Sarah, do you want to add anything? Do you think that's spot on? Okay, great. That answers that. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you very much for confirming. So with that, I will suggest that we leave written comment open until noon on Friday, August 9th, and that we continue discussion of the neighborhood plan to our next meeting on August 15th. Seconded by Jahan. Andrew, would you call the roll?
This
No.
is Steve Carey. I can
Sorry.
do that. No, it's okay. Debbie Howard Easton,
Aye.
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
and Amelia Aboff.
Hi. Thank you guys very much for staying on so late with us. And with that, that is all of our business. So I will then also move to adjourn, seconded by Jahan. Roll call, please.
This is Steve Carey, Debbie Howard Easton,
Aye.
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
and Amelia Aboff.
Hi. Thank you very much. Thanks all.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
everybody.
Everybody.
Thank you so much.
At all.